The air in the office was thick with silence, the kind that makes every heartbeat sound like a drum. The secretary, Zara, stood tall and composed in front of the massive oak desk that separated her from her millionaire boss, Amelia Hart. The city skyline glowed behind Amelia, but even the glittering lights of power couldn't compete with the fire in Zara's eyes. She had spent 2 years in this office, typing letters, organizing files, staying invisible. But today was different. Today, she wasn't here to serve coffee or take notes. Today, she was here to take a stand, to say what her trembling heart had buried for far too long. Amelia looked up, startled by the firmness in Zara's voice when she said, "I'm done hiding." The words hung in the air, defiant and electric. Amelia leaned back in her chair, her perfectly painted lips parting in surprise. "Excuse me," she asked, her tone sharp but uncertain. Zara's confidence didn't waver. "I'm not talking about work, Miss Hart. I'm talking about us." For the first time, Zara saw a flicker of vulnerability in the woman who was always in control, the woman who had built an empire, who commanded every room she entered, except now. Now, she was speechless. Amelia tried to regain her composure, straightening the papers on her desk as if order could calm the storm building inside her. "Zara, this is inappropriate," she murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. Zara took a step closer, her heels clicking like heartbeats against the marble floor. "What's inappropriate," she whispered, "is pretending we don't feel something real." Her words were soft but powerful, each one a confession wrapped in courage. Memories flashed between them, the late nights working side by side, stolen glances, unspoken warmth that lingered in every shared smile. Amelia's mind raced, but her heart was already betraying her. For months, she had buried her feelings under professionalism and pride. But now, under Zara's fearless gaze, the walls began to crumble. "You're crossing a line," Amelia said, her voice trembling. Zara smiled faintly. "Maybe. But some lines were meant to be crossed." Silence fell again, but it wasn't empty anymore. It pulsed with tension, longing, truth. Amelia rose from her chair, standing only a breath away from Zara. Her eyes searched the younger woman's face, looking for hesitation, weakness, anything. But all she saw was honesty and something that looked a lot like love. "You could lose everything," Amelia warned. Zara nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Maybe. But if I walk away now, I'll lose myself." For a moment, the world outside the glass walls disappeared. No titles, no rules, just two souls suspended between fear and freedom. Amelia exhaled slowly, her expression softening. The woman who ruled her world had finally met her match. And though no words followed, the truth between them was louder than any declaration. It was bold. The evening had settled into a soft hum, the kind that wrapped around silence like a comforting blanket. The cafe was nearly empty, save for the faint clinking of cups and the distant tune of a love song playing somewhere between the walls. Amara sat across from Layla, her heart pacing faster than her thoughts. It wasn't the first time they'd sat together like this, sharing quiet laughter, secret glances, and stories that never made it past their lips, but tonight felt different. The air had weight, charged with something unspoken, trembling on the edge of becoming real. Layla's fingers played absently with the rim of her cup, but her eyes were on Amara, steady, searching, and softer than they'd ever been. "You're quiet today," she said, her voice gentle but heavy with meaning. Amara smiled, a little too quickly, as if the curve of her lips could hide the truth pressing against her chest. "Just tired," she lied, but both of them knew better. The space between them was small, yet it felt infinite. Every unsaid word hung there, glowing like fragile light. Layla leaned closer, her perfume, something floral and warm, brushed against Amara's senses. It made her dizzy. "You know," Layla whispered, "sometimes I feel like you're holding a storm inside you." Amara's breath caught. She wanted to speak, to tell her how right she was, how every time their eyes met, the storm grew louder, fiercer, more impossible to contain. But fear, old and familiar, sat between them like a wall made of memories and rules. When Amara finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Layla, if I tell you something, promise me you won't walk away." Layla's gaze didn't falter. "I could never walk away from you." The words fell like a promise and a prayer all at once. The moment stretched, fragile yet infinite, until Amara broke it with the confession she'd carried for far too long. "It's you," she breathed, her voice almost breaking. "It's always been you. I tried to ignore it, to call it friendship, but every time I see you, it's like the world slows down just so I can memorize you all over again." Layla didn't speak. Her eyes shimmered with something between surprise and relief, her lips parting as if to respond but failing to find words. Instead, she reached out, her hand finding Amara's trembling fingers. That single touch, soft, certain, electric, felt like forgiveness, like truth, like coming home. The cafe lights dimmed slightly, and for a heartbeat, the world existed only for them. Layla leaned in, her forehead gently resting against Amara's. "You think I didn't feel it too," she whispered. "Every time you laughed, every time you looked away just before I did, I felt it. I've just been too afraid to say it first." In that quiet confession, everything changed. The walls, the world, the fear, all blurred into the background. What remained was them, two souls finally brave enough to love, even if just in that single, perfect moment. The air in the room was thick with quiet power, the kind that made even the soft hum of the chandelier sound like a secret waiting to be told. The secretary stepped in, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a heartbeat trying to steady itself. She wasn't the same woman who once stood timidly at the door of her boss's office, clutching files and half-swallowed words. No, this time her presence was magnetic, confident, graceful, and dangerously calm. The scent of jasmine trailed behind her, subtle but impossible to ignore. Across the room, the boss turned slowly from her grand mahogany desk, her expression unreadable for a moment. But her eyes, those sharp, commanding eyes, betrayed a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Surprise. Perhaps even awe. She had built walls high enough to keep anyone from touching her, yet here was someone who walked in without knocking them down, just by existing differently. The secretary's poise, her newfound edge, was disarming. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it pulsed between them, charged with unspoken emotions that had been buried under professionalism and fear. The boss's lips parted as if to say something, but all she managed was a breath, soft, unsure. "You look different," she finally whispered, though the words felt inadequate. The secretary's eyes met hers with a quiet fire. "Maybe I just stopped pretending to be small." The power dynamic had shifted, subtly, beautifully, irreversibly. The boss, once the untouchable figure of authority, now felt the ground move beneath her feet. Every reflection in the room, the polished glass table, the metallic frames, the crystal chandelier, seemed to shimmer with the same realization. The secretary wasn't just standing there, she was claiming space that had always been hers but never acknowledged. The boss rose from her chair, slowly, carefully, like someone stepping toward a truth they weren't ready to face. "You think confidence makes you brave?" she asked, her tone more curious than cruel. The secretary smiled faintly. "No," she said, her voice steady, but honesty does. And in that instant, something broke, quietly, almost tenderly. The tension that had once defined them dissolved into something softer, something dangerously close to longing. The boss looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as an employee, not as someone beneath her, but as a woman who had learned to stand in her own light. Their gazes locked, and the world outside that lavish room seemed to blur. Every wall, every rule, every unspoken fear melted away. It wasn't a confession, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement, a silent surrender to something real. In that unexpected encounter, neither won nor lost. They simply stood, two hearts caught between power and vulnerability, strength and softness. The room, once cold and distant, now glowed with a quiet warmth. Sometimes, love doesn't announce itself with words. The rain fell in wild, endless sheets, drenching the world in a blur of gray and blue. Lightning cracked across the sky, splitting the darkness for a heartbeat, and in that flash stood two women, so close, yet trembling with the distance that words had built between them. Zara's fingers were cold, trembling as she reached out to hold Layla's hand. Layla hesitated, her breath shuddering, her eyes reflecting the flicker of neon lights from the cafe sign behind them. The world felt heavy, every raindrop echoing the storm raging inside their hearts. "You can't just walk away," Zara whispered, voice breaking against the thunder. "Not after everything." Her words were fragile, carried away by the wind before they could land. Layla's lips parted, her throat tight with all the things she wanted to say but never could. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, love, fear, guilt, all tangled together. "I'm not walking away," she finally said, eyes glistening. "I'm trying to save us before we destroy each other." Zara took a shaky breath, her heart screaming louder than the storm. "Then why does it feel like you're leaving me in the rain?" The pain in her voice was raw, unfiltered. Layla's hand tightened around hers, a desperate grip that spoke of love too deep to let go and fears too strong to silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. They just stood there, drenched, shaking, bound by an invisible thread of longing and hurt. The storm swirled around them, but it couldn't drown the truth that burned in their eyes. Zara had always been the fire, bold, fearless, and open. Layla was the calm, the quiet shelter, but lately even her silence had turned into walls. Every fight, every unsent message, every unspoken apology had led them here, to this storm that refused to end. "I never wanted to hurt you," Layla said softly, voice trembling. "But I can't keep pretending I'm not scared." Zara's eyes softened, though her heart ached. "Scared of what? Of loving me, or of what the world will say when you do?" Layla's tears mixed with rain, blurring her face until it was impossible to tell where pain ended and love began. "Both," she admitted, a whisper so small it nearly vanished. Zara stepped closer, her forehead pressing against Layla's. "The world has already judged us 1,000 times, she said. "Let them. I just want you to hold my hand through the storm." Lightning flashed again, illuminating their faces, torn, tender, trembling. In that fragile light, they weren't fighting anymore, they were just two souls standing against the world, choosing love even when it hurt. The rain poured harder, yet somehow it felt cleansing. Layla's hand found Zara's again, fingers locking tight. No more running, no more silence. Just two hearts, soaked and shaking, learning that sometimes love doesn't wait for the storm to end, it learns to dance inside it. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a soft hush that seemed to settle over everything, the streets, the leaves, and even their hearts. Aliyah stood by the window, her fingers tracing the fogged glass, lost in the rhythm of water dripping from the eaves. She could still feel Zara's words lingering in the air between them, raw, trembling, and true. For years, they had danced around the truth, hiding their feelings behind laughter, late-night talks, and fleeting touches that said everything they were too afraid to speak aloud. But tonight, something had shifted. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was full of everything they had never dared to say. Zara took a hesitant step closer, her breath catching in her throat. The lamplight from outside cast a golden glow across Aaliyah's face, softening the edges of her sadness and illuminating the quiet strength in her eyes. "Aaliyah," she whispered, her voice trembling yet steady in its resolve. "I'm tired of pretending this isn't real. I'm tired of being afraid of what people will say, of what the world will think. I just want you." The last word broke something open, a fragile, beautiful truth that had been buried under years of fear. Aaliyah turned to face her, tears glimmering like tiny stars. For a moment, neither moved. Time stretched, suspended, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, slowly, Aaliyah crossed the distance between them. Her hand trembled as it reached for Zara's cheek, her thumb brushing away the single tear that had escaped. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that," she murmured, her voice a mix of relief and wonder. Zara leaned into her touch, eyes closing, as if memorizing the warmth of that moment, the first real touch born not of fear, but of love. The world outside faded into a blur of golden lights and fading rain. Inside, their hearts found their rhythm, uneven, desperate, alive. Aaliyah's fingers slipped into Zara's hair, and for a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other, their gazes locked in a silent promise. There was no need for words now. Every glance, every breath, every trembling smile spoke louder than any confession could. When they finally embraced, it wasn't the fiery collision of passion they had imagined, it was something deeper, gentler. A quiet storm of understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to finally choose love. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's warmth, the city lights painted them in hues of amber and rose. The world outside kept moving, but for them, time had stopped. It wasn't about forever or promises of tomorrow, it was about now, about finally being seen, being known, and being loved without apology. And in that embrace, they both knew, this was their resolution, their peace, their beginning.